Kansas has a real estate problem that no one wants to talk about honestly. It is not the problem of prices crashing from luxury heights. It is not the problem of bidding wars cooling. It is something far more fundamental and far more permanent. In towns across southeastern Kansas, southwestern Kansas, and the rural corridors stretching across the Great Plains, the housing market is not declining. It has already arrived at its destination, a destination where homes are priced below $60,000 and still cannot find buyers, where poverty rates exceed 20%, where populations are shrinking year after year, where the economic engine that once justified a community's existence has gone quiet, and nothing has come to replace it. Here is the statewide context. According to the WUSU Center for Economic Development and Business Research's October 2025 50-year forecast, rural Kansas counties could lose nearly half their population over the next 5 decades. Kansas loses 25 to 29-year-olds faster than any other state in the nation, according to U.S. News & World Report. Most Kansas cities lost population between 2020 and 2023, according to the Sentinel's census analysis. In specific Kansas towns, that trajectory is not a warning about the future. It is a description of the present. Today, Discover the States reveals the 10 Kansas towns where real estate has no future, not because prices are falling from great heights, but because the foundation that gives real estate value, population, employment, demand, and a reason to stay has already eroded beyond recovery. Town number 10, Iola. Iola sits in Allen County in southeastern Kansas, a region that has been shedding population and economic vitality for decades without interruption. The housing data from HomeSnacks 2025 is direct. Iola's average home price is just $72,294. The unemployment rate stands at 6.7%, well above both the Kansas and national averages. And the crime rate sits at 4.67 per 100 residents, a number that reflects the social stress that accompanies persistent economic decline. Here is the real estate reality in Iola. A home priced at $72,294 in a town with 6.7% unemployment and above-average crime is not a bargain. It is a market signal. Home prices are set by demand. In Iola, demand is set by who wants to live there, and the data on unemployment, on crime, on population trajectory answers that question clearly. Allen County sits in southeastern Kansas, a region the WU Center for Economic Development and Business Research identifies as part of the rural Kansas corridor, facing the most severe long-term population loss projections. Young adults leave for Wichita, Kansas City, or out of state entirely. Older residents age in place, businesses close as the customer base thins, and the homes left behind compete for a buyer pool that grows smaller every year. In Iola, the future of real estate is not uncertain. The data has already written it. Town number 9, Independence. Independence carries a name that once meant something powerful in Kansas. Montgomery County's county seat. It was historically one of the wealthiest cities per capita in the United States, built on oil wealth that flowed through southeastern Kansas in the early 20th century. That wealth is gone, and it took the real estate market with it. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Independence's median home price sits at $78,500. According to RoadSnacks 2025 analysis of census data, the median household income in Independence is just $49,164 with a poverty rate of 16.3%. The population has fallen to approximately 8,469 residents, continuing the multi-decade decline that has hollowed out the city since its oil-era peak. The Coffeyville Independence Corridor in Montgomery County represents one of the most persistent patterns of economic stagnation in all of Kansas. According to community commentary cited in HomeSnacks, Independence's historic oil mansions still standing in the city are now run down and largely worthless, despite their architectural significance. That image, grand homes from a prosperous era, now deteriorating without buyers willing or able to restore them, is the most honest visual description of Independence's real estate market. History does not sustain property values. Current demand does. And current demand in Independence is constrained by unemployment, low incomes, and a population that has been voting with its feet for generations. Town number 8, Concordia. Concordia sits in Cloud County in north-central Kansas, far from the population corridors of Wichita and Kansas City, and far from the economic growth that those cities represent for Kansas's future. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Concordia earns a place among the cheapest and most economically challenged towns in Kansas. The city's crime rate exceeds the U.S. average. The local poverty rate sits at 15.8%. The economic foundation agriculture and regional services has contracted as farm automation reduces labor needs and the surrounding rural population thins. According to Wikipedia's documentation of the depopulation of the Great Plains, which describes a process that began in the early 1900s, accelerated during the Dust Bowl, and has generally continued through every census since Cloud County and the north-central Kansas corridor, where Concordia sits, have been part of this long-term depopulation pattern for over a century. A real estate market in a community losing population for over 100 years is not a market in temporary decline. It is a market in structural retreat. In Concordia, the future of real estate is determined not by interest rates or inventory cycles, but by the fundamental question of whether enough people will choose to live there to sustain a functioning market. The data accumulated over a century provides a sobering answer. Town number 7, Fort Scott. Fort Scott carries genuine historical significance. A national historic site. Victorian architecture that speaks to a prosperous 19th century past. A physical environment that, in a different economic context, might support a thriving real estate market. The economic context is not different, and the real estate market reflects it. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Fort Scott ranks among the 10 cheapest places to live in Kansas, a distinction driven not by investment opportunity, but by the persistent weakness of local demand. Bourbon County sits in southeastern Kansas, part of the regional corridor where poverty rates, population loss, and economic stagnation have been compounding for decades. The Wuzoo Center for Real Estate's 2025 Kansas Housing Forecast noted that the Southeast Kansas chapter of the Kansas Association of Realtors represents one of the most challenging regional markets in the state where transaction volume is thin, days on market are extended, and the pool of qualified buyers is constrained by the same low-income realities that define the region's economic profile. Fort Scott's historic buildings are real assets. Its natural surroundings are genuine, but assets without buyers create markets without futures. And in Fort Scott, the buyers, particularly the young families who would sustain long-term market health, are choosing to be somewhere else. Town number 6, Chanute. Chanute is one of the most data-documented struggling towns in Kansas, appearing on multiple authoritative lists that measure economic stress, poverty, and quality of life challenges simultaneously. According to RoadSnacks 2025, Chanute ranks as the third poorest city in Kansas. The median household income is just $47,885, the third lowest in the state. The poverty rate is 20.6%, and the unemployment rate ranks among the 9th highest in Kansas, reflecting an economy that is not generating the jobs needed to sustain the population it has, let alone grow. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Chanute's median home price is $77,900. The city's population in 2025 is projected at approximately 8,588, barely holding even, with prior years showing the kind of stagnation that precedes more visible decline. Chanute's violent crime rate stands at 719 per 100,000 residents, 67% above the Kansas state average, according to FB Uniform Crime Report data cited by RioLink's 2026 Kansas analysis. Economic decline, aging infrastructure, and substance abuse issues are explicitly cited as drivers of the city's persistent crime challenge. Here is what Chanute's housing market data describes at its core. A home priced at $77,900 in a town where 1 in 5 residents lives in poverty, where unemployment is among the highest in the state, and where violent crime runs 67% above average is not a market with a future. It is a market describing its present, and that present has been deteriorating steadily for a long time. Town number 5, Parsons. Parsons sits in Labette County, and its data profile is among the most challenging of any Kansas town of its size. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Parsons ranks among the worst places to live in Kansas, with a poverty rate exceeding 20% and a crime rate 75% above the national average. The median home price sits at just $70,300, the second cheapest of any Kansas city. Population has been steadily dwindling, as HomeSnacks notes directly, citing population loss as an ongoing trend, not without reason. According to RoadSnacks 2025, Parsons ranks as the fourth poorest city in Kansas with a median household income ranking as the eighth lowest in the state, and a poverty incidence among the fifth highest. The violent crime rate in Parsons is among the most alarming in the state. According to FBI data cited by RealLink's 2026 Kansas analysis, Parsons posts 959 violent crimes per 100,000 residents, 123% higher than the Kansas state average. The third highest violent crime rate of any Kansas city. In Parsons, the real estate story is not about market cycles. It is about the conditions that make a housing market function: safety, employment, income, population stability, and the systematic absence of those conditions across decades of economic contraction. A home priced at $70,300 that struggles to find a buyer is not a bargain. It is a measurement of exactly how much a functioning real estate market depends on the community around it, and what happens when that community cannot provide the foundation a market needs. Town number 4, Pittsburg. Pittsburg is home to Pittsburg State University, and that university presence creates what appears, on the surface, to be an economic anchor that should stabilize the local housing market. The data cuts through that surface. According to RoadSnacks 2025, Pittsburg is the poorest city in Kansas for 2025. Median household income of approximately $31,000 per year, among the absolute lowest in the state. A poverty rate approaching 25%. And a property crime rate where, according to HomeSnacks, residents face a 1 in 20 chance of being victimized by theft annually. The university paradox in Pittsburg mirrors what we see in Kansas university towns statewide. Students arrive. They generate demand for rental housing, food service, and retail. They graduate. And then in a state that loses 25 to 29-year-olds faster than any other in the nation, according to U.S. News and World Report, they leave Kansas entirely. Pittsburg State produces graduates who leave Crawford County. The economic investment in their education flows to other states. What remains is a city with the infrastructure built to serve a larger, more economically dynamic population, and a housing market priced to reflect the reality of who actually stays. At a median income of $31,000 and a poverty rate near 25%, the residents of Pittsburg are not building equity in a rising market. They are navigating a housing landscape where the future is constrained by the same economic forces that have defined this community's trajectory for decades. Town number 3, Coffeyville. Coffeyville carries one of the most dramatic histories of any small American city. The site where the Dalton Gang was captured in 1892, a city that once ran on oil refinery wealth, a community that, at various points in its history, represented genuine Kansas prosperity. The 2025 data tells a different story. According to HomeSnacks 2025, Coffeyville's average home value is $53,100, the lowest of any city in Kansas. The average home value in Kansas as a whole is $157,600, nearly 3 times higher. According to Home Stratosphere's May 2025 Zillow Home Value Index analysis, Coffeyville's home prices declined 40% from $69,818 in 2010 to $61,547 in 2025, a 15-year decline in a state where most markets have appreciated. According to RoadSnacks 2025, Coffeyville ranks as the second poorest city in Kansas. Median household income of just $41,220, the lowest in the state. A poverty rate of 18.9%. According to Kansas demographics data, the 2025 projected population for Coffeyville is 8,468, declining at an annual rate of 0.9% per the Census Bureau's 2024 population estimates program. HomeSnacks summarized Coffeyville's market with a clarity that every real estate analyst should take seriously. Homes are priced by demand, and there's not a lot of demand to live in Coffeyville. That sentence, "homes are priced by demand," is the most honest description of what determines real estate value in any market. And in Coffeyville, demand has been falling for 15 years. Prices have followed. The population is projected to keep declining, and the industries that once made this city worth living in have contracted without replacement. Coffeyville's real estate market is not broken. It is accurately priced for the demand that exists. The problem is that the demand tells a story about this community's trajectory that 15 years of data has made unmistakably clear. Town number 2, Southeast Kansas, the regional collapse. Our second entry is not a single town, it is a region. Because the most important Kansas real estate story is not any individual city's decline. It is the systematic, regional pattern that connects every town we have discussed. Southeastern Kansas, the corridor encompassing Montgomery, Labette, Crawford, Neosho, Allen, Bourbon, and Wilson counties represents the most concentrated zone of housing market stress in the entire state. Consider what the data shows collectively. Coffeyville. Average home $53,100. Median income $41,220. Poverty 18. 9%. Population declining 0.9% annually. Independence median home $78,500. Median income $49,164. Poverty 16.3%. Parsons median home $70,300. Poverty over 20%. Crime 75% above national average. Chanute median home $77,900. Poverty 20.06%. Unemployment 9th highest in Kansas. Pittsburg median income $31,000. Poverty near 25%. Fort Scott among Kansas's 10 cheapest markets. 6 cities, 1 region. Every data point pointing in the same direction. According to the WUSU Center for Economic Development and Business Research's October 2025 50-year forecast, the rural and small city corridors of southeastern Kansas are projected for continued, sustained population loss. The forecast identifies this region as among the most vulnerable in the state, where economic diversification has not occurred, where population replacement has not occurred, and where the trajectory established over the past 50 years is projected to continue for the next 50. A real estate market is only as strong as the community it sits inside. In southeastern Kansas, the communities are contracting. The markets are contracting with them. And no amount of low prices changes the fundamental equation. Value requires demand. And demand requires people who want to be there. Town number 1, Western Kansas, where the market has already ended. The most honest Kansas real estate story is not in any of the southeastern towns we have discussed. It is further west. In the counties where the question is no longer whether the housing market has a future, but whether there is enough population left to sustain any market at all. Greeley County, Kansas. According to U.S. Census Bureau data, Greeley County has a population of approximately 200 people spread across 778 square miles. That is 1.5 people per square mile. The county seat of Tribune has fewer than 700 residents. Stanton County. Population approximately 2,000. Declining Clark County home to Ashland, where Home Stratosphere records a 2025 median home value of $70,569. A home priced at $70,569 in a county with a population density approaching 1 person per square mile. A market where the question is not what the home is worth, but whether there is anyone within driving distance who needs to buy it. According to Wikipedia's documentation of the depopulation of the Great Plains, many Great Plains counties in Kansas have lost more than 60% of their former populations. The depopulation process began over a century ago, accelerated during the Dust Bowl, and has continued through every census since 2010. According to the WUSU Center for Economic Development and Business Research, Decatur County in northwest Kansas is specifically projected to lose nearly half its remaining population by 2040. In these western Kansas counties, calling what exists a real estate market requires a definition of market that is different from what the term means anywhere else in America. A market requires buyers and sellers. It requires enough transactions to establish comparable sales data. It requires a population dense enough to generate the demand that gives property its value. In Greeley County, Stanton County, Clark County, and the dozens of similar western Kansas counties, that threshold has already been passed. Not approached. Passed. According to UMPR's reporting on rural Kansas, demographer Ken Johnson of the University of New Hampshire stated it clearly: rural farm counties are more likely to lose young adults than anyone else. They leave for college or better jobs. With fewer childbearing adults remaining, communities start to shrivel. That is the word a professional demographer chose to describe what is happening to western Kansas communities. Not decline, not slow down, shrivel. A home in a shriveling community does not have a real estate future in any conventional sense. It has 4 walls, a roof, and a price that accurately reflects the absence of demand. And in western Kansas, That absence is not temporary. It is structural demographic and documented across more than 100 years of census data. 10 towns, 10 data sets, one honest conclusion. Kansas's statewide housing market is not collapsing. Let's be clear about that. The average Kansas home value is $240,057, up 3% over the past year according to Zillow. The statewide median is $262,900, up 5% according to Hozeo. Kansas City's suburbs are competitive. Wichita is growing modestly. The state's strongest markets are functioning. But the towns in this video are not the state's strongest markets. They are the towns where the forces of rural depopulation, economic contraction, poverty, and population loss have already produced a verdict on real estate's future. Coffeyville at $53,100 average home value, down 40% since 2010. Parsons at $70,300 with a crime rate 75% above national average and a poverty rate over 20%. Pittsburg with $31,000 median household incomes and a 25% poverty rate. Chanute with the third lowest median income in Kansas and a violent crime rate 67% above the state average. And the western Kansas counties, where population density has fallen below the threshold required to sustain a functioning housing market. These are not markets that need better marketing. They are not markets waiting for the right catalyst. They are markets where the fundamental ingredients of real estate value, population, employment, income, safety, and a reason to stay have been systematically absent for so long that their absence has become the defining characteristic. Understanding this matters. Real estate value is not created by square footage. It is not created by location alone. It is created by the community that surrounds the property, its economy, its population, its trajectory. In these 10 Kansas towns, the trajectory has already written the future. Knowing where real estate has no future is not optional. For anyone considering buying, selling, or investing in these communities, it is essential. Thank you for watching this in-depth report from Discover the States. If you found this analysis valuable, leave a comment with your perspective. Share this video to spread awareness, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next.